Greetings, best of Trekkers! Today we're going to have a look at the wheat and the chaff in probably Trek's most controversial show, Discovery, on this edition of...
Yeah, it's the best five, worst five, no one has seen. Yeah, it's the best five, worst five Trek's ever seen.
Whether you think Discovery is the great abomination to happen to the franchise, or a decent modernization of the Trek formula, there's a lot of nuance through its 5 seasons. As a whole, I haven't been a fan of the season arcs, but for Star Trek's most serialized show, there's something interesting in almost every individual episode. As usual, we're starting at the 5th worst. Forget Me Not. The episode starts with some great character dynamics building on the crew's jump to the 32nd century. This is even the episode where the computer Zora gains sentience. Even in this plot, though, there's the weird dinner scene where Detmer takes out her misplaced rage on Stamets. Pretty much everything on Trill, though, including the your body, my choice moment, where they try and separate Adira and Tal forcibly, is pretty hard to watch. The set designers did a great job recreating the symbiont caves, but then there's the whole breathing underwater somehow and CGI randomness that just don't captivate me. Number 4, Rosetta. This episode really bores me. In their effort to understand the 10C, Burnham and an away team visit their decimated homeworld for clues. Saru acts strange, and eventually so do the others. That's about the crux of it. It's weird to say this, but one of the big things that doesn't work for me is that a major character doesn't die. It was foreshadowed really hard that Detmer was likely to not make it back from this mission. And she made it back from this mission. I like Detmer a lot, but it's just bad storytelling. The random CGI in the background on this planet just seems like random forms at times for the sake of doing it. Honestly, the only things worth watching in this episode are Jet Reno's talk with Adira and 3D crossword puzzles. Number 3, The Red Angel. You know it's bad when starting with the remembrance of a dead crew member is the high point of the episode, and it's all downhill from there. The entire season arc of The Red Angel did very little for me personally, but this episode in particular doesn't do anything for me at all. The crux of it is cementing Michael as Space Jesus by finally giving her a chance to sacrifice herself to hopefully summon the Red Angel that they've been chasing around the galaxy. This show loves killing its main characters and bringing them back to life, and that really doesn't jive for me. Number 2, Leth. You'd think bringing a young Sarek into the picture would make for a good episode. But honestly, the best thing here is probably Tilly and Burnham running through Discovery. I generally think Season 1 is one of Discovery's better seasons, but this whole thing of Burnham finding a near-death Sarek from light years away with some brain tech, and then doing random Street Fighter battles with him is just plain odd. The acting by Sarek's aide that betrays him comes off as lifeless, even for portraying a Vulcan, and I find very little interesting about this episode. And Discovery's worst episode at number 1? Stormy Weather. For me, the 4th season is Discovery's overall worst, with this being the bottom of the barrel. I know there's a segment of fans that find this a great episode, and I honestly have no idea why. If it's just because it's directed by Jonathan Frakes, I guess I see why you want to believe in one of Trek's best directors, but this is probably the 2nd worst episode he has under his belt, only after Sub Rosa. First and foremost, there's a threat supposedly coming towards the ship, but after the initial scenes trying to scan for it, it's never brought up again, or defined. It's just a blank MacGuffin found in a void. If they told us it was the power of the nothing from the never-ending story that was going to destroy them, I wouldn't sin the plot point so hard. But it's some of the most lazy writing in Trek. By the end, when Burnham has to endure extreme heat and Zora's singing Stormy Weather to her, I was honestly hoping Discovery wouldn't make it, due to the worst plot I'd seen in this lackluster season. As we use the mycelial network to jump to the best of Discovery. If you're enjoying the content, please consider a like and subscribe. At 5th best, if memory serves, Spock sure does like taking people to the only planet in the galaxy that the Federation has a death penalty for visiting. This is a really interesting callback to Trek's very first attempt at television, The Cage. It does a heck of a lot to flesh out the relationship between Spock and his adopted sister, while also giving Pike a chance to reconnect with the woman we know he'll eventually spend the rest of his life with after his unfortunate accident. Even the recap at the beginning of the episode is excellent, showing the events of The Cage. The CGI is pretty great, with the illusion of a black hole that Spock leans into. The episode even won a well-deserved Emmy for makeup. Number 4. There is a Tide, and That Hope Is For You, Part 2. Even if I think the source of the burn being revealed to be a sad Kelpian child is a little lame, the exploration of his disjointed, falling-apart hollow world is a great natural extension of the show's favorite book, Alice in Wonderland. There's so much going on in this third season's 2-part ending, including the addition of the second episode title being a Part 2, and the original title it appends was the first episode of the season, but this is just a naming gimmick. Tilly leading the retaking of Discovery after being the officer at the con that lost it is definitively rivaling Picard's Die Hard on a Starship moment. Learning what the replicators actually use as a base for their nutrient substance is, eye-opening. While not Discovery's best episode, this is pretty much the pinnacle of Disco before it slides into mediocrity over the final 2 seasons. Number 3. Through the Valley of Shadows. Pike learns in this episode what we already knew from the menagerie, that he's going to end up in the beep chair from a radiation accident. He even has the opportunity to not have this be his ultimate fate, but in his quest to save the galaxy from control, he does what any good Starfleet officer would, and tells the son of none to hold his beer. This is a very powerful plot that literally brings Pike to his knees. There's one other minor scene between Reno and Culber where she not so subtly tells him to quit being an and start living. There's another pretty mediocre thing with Control cosplaying as the T-1000, but Pike's revelation is truly what lands this episode in the best category. Number 2. What's Past is Prologue. The conclusion of Discovery's foray into the Mirror Universe is pretty epic. The battle for the throne room and how Mirror Lorca finally buys it in a ball of fungal energy is maybe the coolest Trek death ever. It's just plain a great non-stop action episode of which Trek has few. As they make their way back to the Prime Universe, the reveal that they've ended up almost a year later and the Klingons are about to win the war is one heck of a punch to the gut after wrapping up all the Terran shenanigans. And the best episode in Discovery at number 1, Magic to Make the Sanest Man Go Mad. This is maybe the only Discovery episode that doesn't require knowledge of a season arc and can be enjoyed by anyone. It's helpful to know who the bumbling scallywag Harry Mudd is, but not a prerequisite. This is easily the best time loop episode across Trek, and watching the crew, particularly Lorca, die in increasingly interesting ways is not just satisfying, but actively hilarious. It's fun doing disco on disco, and hey, we finally get to see what a space whale looks like up close. What's your favorite episode of Discovery?